We are glad you're here today. Hope you enjoyed seeing our kiddos. It was a little creepy, but we took it, right? Am I the only one that thought the recital? Yeah, I got some college kids. They feel me, right? But it's impressive nonetheless. And so we wanted to share that with you and make sure you could enjoy and just see. They leave us every week and kind of get a glimpse of some of what they do, but they do so much more. So if ever you want to be a part of that, we are always accepting volunteers. All right? So we love that. We love our kiddos. We're glad they were in here with us, but they took up some of my time. And if I go long, y'all are going to blame me. You're not going to blame the cute little kids, right? And so I got to get into it, I guess. So today's our last day of the MIXTAPE series. It's been a fun summer. We've had a good time with this. And so we're going to wrap this up today. Next week, back to school blessing. Invite every teacher, parent, family, kid, student you know. It's going to be a fun time. I promise next week not to talk for more than about 8 minutes. Yeah, right? Now, everybody else that talks, I can't guarantee their timeline, but I'm only going to talk for about 8 minutes next week. But it's going to be good. Invite. It's a great day to introduce people to our church and to what we're trying to do here at Jinx Church. But today we're going to wrap up this mixtape series. I'm going to warn you in advance. We've been in Acts all summer long. I have one verse from Acts this morning. It's all the way at the end, so you're going to have to wait on it, okay? But we will get there eventually. Let's start with our anthem as we have every week this summer in this series, and recite it together with me. It'll be up on the screen. You can say it with me. Make us an unstoppable force through your power. Help us change the world with an urgency for your unquestionable truth. And that's where we've gone. That's what we've tried to accomplish this summer, is building this mindset that says we want to attack the world. We want to attack it with love and kindness and goodness and grace and mercy, but also with the truth that says, hey, we're all separated from God at some point and we need Jesus to get back. That's the unquestionable truth. And that's what we're going to talk about today is this idea of our message. And that's really the theme for the rest of the book of Acts that we're not going to get into until a future date. But that's where Peter and Paul and all the other apostles, and really, I paused because I got to thinking, really even all the way to now, that was the whole point. That the message of the gospel was for everybody, and we need to do whatever we can to take it to the world. And so that's kind of how we're going to wrap up this morning. But let me just start with this, all right? I love church. Now, that's a weird thing to say, especially if you come from a background where maybe you've got some scars, some baggage, maybe church was really boring as a kid, right? But I love it, and I've loved it even with all the bad. I've loved it since I was a kid, right? I love VBS. I love being the kid that recited stuff and all that. I loved just doing everything and being a part of everything. As I got older, I loved youth group and all the trips and camps and mission things. I realized this week I'm way too old for that stuff now. After a week at camp with our high school, man, those beds are hard. It is. Yeah, you don't want to go. I mean, you do, but you want to bring an air mattress. Is the idea there? You want to bring your own. What's that? How old? I am 40 now. So, yeah. In this part of the world, if Steve Wilson was here, I had the greatest little clip for him ever, right? I'm a man. I'm 40, you know? I just don't have the mullet to go with it. All right, y'all are getting me sidetracked, and we don't have a lot of time. We got to go. I love church. I love when people yell out in church because it makes me lose track and just chase rabbits, and it's fun, and church should be fun. And church is amazing unless you don't speak the language. And that's what we do, isn't it? Like, church has its own language. We say words that we don't use in any other part of our lives. We talk about things like eating a body and drinking blood, and we don't think that's weird, right? We have our kids recite names that nobody's ever heard of, and we think that's normal, right? There's a whole language in church that if you're not from a church background, makes absolutely no sense. And I didn't realize that as a kid. I didn't even realize that as I got into ministry. But the longer I do this now, I can kind of step back and say, you know what? We do some really weird things. And that's okay. There's nothing bad about that. We just have to be able to admit it. Now, listen, I think I said this last week, but it applies here as well. If you look at what we do and you say, oh, there's nothing weird here, You're the weird. You're what makes us weird, right? And so we've got to be able to admit it because everybody else sees it, so we have to admit it ourselves. We do some goofy stuff, right? Let me put it a little clear, a little more direct, and maybe a little better to package that I won't get in trouble for later, right? What we have done as church people is we have created a culture designed for church people. Right? We've created environments and a culture and a language that's designed for church people. And again, that in itself, not a bad thing. Right? Because if all there is this world, if all there is just us as a group of Christians getting together and talking about Jesus and talking about God, then there's nothing wrong with it. But if you believe, like I do, that a few thousand years ago, God came down to earth in the form of Jesus, and He did something amazing. He died on a cross. He rose from a grave. He overcame death for me and you. If you believe that like I believe that, then this becomes a problem. Because, see, you and I weren't created to develop better church people. And if we have a culture that only church people get, if we speak a language that only church people get, we're not reaching anybody but other church people. I'll be honest with you, this year has been crazy for me, but one phrase that has stuck into my head over and over and over is, right after we got here, we started getting flooded with, hey, you need to meet so-and-so. They used to go to church here, and now they go over here. And you need to meet so-and-so, and they used to go to church here, and now they go over here. And I got flooded with all these people who are active in churches that I was supposed to go and meet and pursue. I have not met or pursued any of them in the last year. Because our assignment is not to steal church people from other churches. Our assignment is to help people meet Jesus that don't know Jesus. And we can't do that if we've created a culture designed for church people. And so what we're going to pursue, what we're going to continue in this next year of life together to go after is we're going to create an environment that unchurched people like. And that's messy. And that's weird. And that comes with its own set of problems and adjustments and struggles. But we'll deal with that. Because at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to create a culture not for church people. We want to create a culture for people who are looking, people who are searching, people who are longing to know Jesus, and give them a place where they can confidently show up and experience Him. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to around the time of the book of Acts ends, actually. And the guy we've looked at the last couple of weeks, Paul. Right? You know Paul, he was Saul, then he's Paul, blinded by the light, and then he comes to know Jesus, and his life's forever changed. He goes from hating Christians and pursuing Christians to now he's proclaiming Christ. And so he begins to establish churches, and one of the churches he went to establish was in Rome. Now that in itself is the craziest idea, because in Rome, if you're a Christian, you are lion food. You are the laughingstock. You are the one that is arrested. Right? Being a Christian in Rome is the worst idea possible, and so to establish a church there is absolutely crazy. But that's what Paul began to do, and he would write a letter to them, and we know it as the book of Romans, and it's an amazing book. If you ask Mark, it's the greatest book, and the greatest chapter is chapter 8, and it's fantastic, but we're not going to be in chapter 8 today. We're going to be in chapter 3, because you don't get to chapter 8 without chapter 3. He's an accountant. He knows numbers. That works, right? So let's look at it. Matthew chapter 3, and beginning in verse 21, because here's what's going on. They're having this discussion about how do we do church? Who gets in? Who's doing it right? Who's doing it wrong? You've got the Jews, you've got the Gentiles. They obviously come from different cultures. They have different backgrounds. They have different ways of looking at it. Who's right? And Paul addresses it in Romans chapter 3. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God. When you see that word righteousness, what we're talking about is right standing. You're in a good place with God. You and He have a relationship. He has paid for it. He has bought it. You have a right standing with God. The righteousness of God has been made known. No mystery. No secret. Right? Jesus showed up. We've seen Him. We've experienced Him. To which the law and the prophets testify. And he's catering to the Jewish audience first. He's saying, hey, guys, we talked about this forever. Moses talked about this. We've been anticipating the Messiah. We've been anticipating the Christ. Now he's shown up. You've seen him. Because Paul's not writing this hundreds of years or thousands of years after Christ. He's writing it just a few short years after Christ. There are still eyewitnesses. There are still people that you can go and talk to. There are still people that can back up what I'm saying. And so you know this. You've been anticipating the coming of Christ, and here he is. He goes on to say, this righteousness is given, right? It's not earned. It's given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who behave. That's not what yours says, right? It says believe, but how do we treat it? We treat it like it's behave. Right? If I do the right things, if I earn it, if I say the right things, if I attend church, right? Because as a kid, I loved so much. I loved church so much. And one of the things I loved about church was we were the only ones going to heaven. And you weren't supposed to say that, but I was a kid who said a lot of things you weren't supposed to say. But that's what we secretly all thought, right? We're the only ones going to heaven because we go to church more than everybody else. My friends didn't go on Sunday night. My friends didn't go on Wednesday night. He went Sunday morning. I went Sunday night, Wednesday, and then, wait for it, Monday night visitation. You remember those? Yeah, right? So we've got to be going to heaven because I've got all the right answers and we go more often. You know what I found out? All my other friends from every other denomination secretly thought the same thing, that they were the only ones going to heaven. Now, none of that's accurate. None of that's theology, right? That's just that goofiness that we create in our mind. It's that weird stuff that we make up and think that we're better. And what Jesus is saying, what Paul is saying as he writes this is, listen, that righteousness, you don't earn it. It's given to you. It's given to you through faith to all, to everyone, not just to some, not to one group or the other. It's to all, not because of how they behave, but because they believe. That this righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. All. Doesn't matter your background. Doesn't matter your race. Doesn't matter your status. Doesn't matter your nationality. Doesn't even matter your belief in God. God came to earth as Jesus and died for all. Period. Doesn't matter what categories you and I want to put on people. Jesus died for all of them. He said, I've provided righteousness for all who believe. And then look what he says. He says, there is no difference. Are you kidding me? There's a ton of differences. Difference in how we worship. Difference in who gets to lead worship. Difference in what our building says or doesn't say. And our names and not our names. And right. There's all kinds of differences. What do you mean there's absolutely no difference? Are you not paying attention? Right? Of course we're different. That's why we meet in 8,000 different buildings, right? There's lots of differences. From the outside, can you imagine? Just, all right. I'm trying to rush for time, but we got to stop for a second. Pretend like you haven't gone to church forever. And step back. And think of all the different arguments and fights and discussions you've heard in church over your lifetime. If you're on the outside looking in, can you imagine what that looks like? It looks like, okay, guys, you get it all figured out, then I might join. Then I might come and see what you're all about. But as long as you can't even figure it out amongst yourselves, I don't really want any part of that. See, churches don't shrink because of styles and ideas and ministers. Churches start shrinking. Churches start dying when we forget our message. When we can't agree on what matters. When we start looking at all of our differences and we can't celebrate what unifies us. And that's what he's saying here. He says there is no difference, but look at the next verse. For all have sinned. Oh, you're not even talking about different styles and traditions and rituals and no. Because none of that matters. What matters is we've all sinned. Every one of us has experienced separation from Jesus, separation from God, and the only way back to Him is through the cross. He says there's no difference because you're all sinners. You've all messed up. You've all sinned. He goes on to say, for all have sinned, and all, I added that word, fall short of the glory of God. Nobody gets it right. We all need Jesus to get where we need to go in this life and in the next. He goes, all fall short of the glory of God. And you know what that word glory means, right? It's a really cool word. The word glory is prestige, it's greatness, it's splendor, it's radiance, it's the perfection of God. None of us earn that. None of us can achieve that on our own. The only way we attain that is through Christ Jesus. If you know me well, you know I hate to be late, right? And my late is much, much different than your late. This is my third time to be on the stage this morning, and this is the third audience I've looked at. Because there's part of you that show up on time. Then there's part of you that show up just after the welcome. And then there's another part of you that you're like church ninjas. I don't really know when you sneak in, but you manage to get in, and when I get back up here, there you are. And it's like a whole new audience. I get excited because I'm like, hey, I didn't see you guys earlier. That's good, right? But for me, when I say I hate to be late, 15 minutes early is on time. Okay? Or maybe late. I'm not sure. The older I get, that's kind of pushing it. Right? So my wife loves to get places 5 minutes late. I like a half hour early. Right? Perfect illustration of this is the airport. When I fly, I want to beat my plane to the airport. Okay? Like, if I'm catching a flight, I don't even want it to have left the gate it's coming from to my airport yet. I want to get there early. I want to have plenty of time. In my lifetime, I have missed one flight. Right? You maybe heard me reference this a few months ago in a story I told. This is a different story, so don't check out, right? I missed one flight. Been in Africa, fly home, land in Dulles, D.C. at about 5:30 in the morning. My connecting flight doesn't leave until 10. I'm feeling good about it. I think I'm going to make it, right? I missed that flight. Only flight I've ever missed in my life. Now, it wasn't my fault. Right? Apparently I looked sketchy, and so I got pulled out of every security check known to man. I had air blown in places the air shouldn't blow. I had men that we now are best friends because we got close. I don't know what about me made me look like I needed to be searched that many times, but I did. And so I get through security finally. I'm running to my gate. I can see my gate as they close the door. And I get there, and I do what I do. I start talking, right? Listen, I can still see the plane. I can run down there. I can get through the door and on the plane before anybody else shows up. Nobody has to know. You've got to let me in. Please, please, please let me in. And you know what the lady said? Nope, door's already closed. Because when they close that door, they become like God, right? They hold your life in your hand at that moment, right? And so I'm there about 30, 45 seconds late. I don't make the plane. But then all of a sudden, all these other people from my same group that finally made it through, they start showing up too. But listen, they don't eat on that plane. They were 5 minutes late. Some of them were 10 minutes late. Some of them, like y'all, I don't even know when they showed up, but all of a sudden they're in the crowd with me while I'm arguing and pleading to get on the plane. Guess how many of us got on the plane that day? Zero. Zero of us, because we all fell short of the glory of American Airlines. That's it. Nothing we could say or do could get on that flight. And nothing you and I can say or do can earn us the righteousness, the glory that is of God. His perfection, His prestige, His greatness. And see, but what I love about this, right? When it says Christ died for all who believe, Christ died for the whole world, Christ died for every one of it, it shows up. It shows up, but it doesn't stop. Because at the end of verse 23, there's not a period. There's a comma. There's an and. Because it's a continuation. It keeps going. All fall short of the glory of God and are justified freely by His grace, by Jesus' grace, through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. Don't tell me about the differences. Don't tell me what separates us. Don't tell me why we can't get along and why we... He says, look at the one thing that unifies. Look at the one thing that we all have in common, that every single person that breathes has in common. That we all fall short of the glory of God. But we all have access. We all have the ability, because Jesus shows up and he said, I've already paid for them. Open the door. Let them in. They're with me. We have somebody that gives us access to freedom, to righteousness, to the glory of God. God says, listen, I showed up and I did something completely new. Didn't create a new religion. The world has plenty of those. He said, I created a movement of a group of people who are going to pursue, who are going to follow, who are going to recognize that the only reason they accomplish anything in this life is because of Jesus. And the only way we have hope for the next life is because of Jesus. And he says, I'm going to give them right standing. I'm going to give them a righteousness that is not their own. And so then he keeps going. If you skip down to verse 27, he asks a question that I love, right? He says, hey, where's your boasting? What are you bragging about? What do you have to tout and celebrate and pat yourself on the back for? And the next line says, it is excluded. See, we don't boast because we've done something, because we've earned something. We don't boast because all of a sudden I'm better than this group or that group. I've never sinned. No. We've all sinned. We all have nothing to brag about, but we all have access because of Christ. See, the big point of the whole book of Acts, this whole series we've done all summer, the whole big point that I don't want you to miss today, but really I don't want you to ever miss because it's the culture that we want to create as a church, is that we've got to remember the message of Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Because, see, the idea is that if the message of the church is for everybody, then the culture of the church shouldn't exclude anybody. That if the message of the church is for everybody, then the culture shouldn't tell anybody they're not welcome. The culture shouldn't leave anybody on the outside. We can't create a culture where people don't feel like they can come beat up and bruised and battered. Right? It's not, hey, when you read the right book and you speak the language and you figure it all out and get yourself cleaned up, then you can come in. No. The culture has to reflect the message. And the message says, we've all sinned. We've all fallen short. But it's by the grace of God that we can all be included. That we can all be welcomed in. That we can all have a part of what it is. See, there is no right language to speak. There is no right way to pursue God. No right way to behave. It's belief. When we pursue Jesus with all that we are, the behavior takes care of itself. The language figures itself out. The culture is created, centered around Jesus. I told you we get to one verse from the book of Acts to wrap up the Acts series. Here it is. It's a verse that changed the way I approach ministry. Changed the way I approach being a dad and a husband and just a good human being. And it's written by James, the brother of Jesus. Now for me, James is the one guy that has helped me more than any other in my adult faith. Right? Because James, the brother of Jesus, did not believe that Jesus was who he said he was till after the resurrection. And I get it. If my brother showed up and said, hey, I'm the Son of God, I would spit in his face and say, you're a dirty, dirty liar. Right? I beat you up last week. There's no way you're Jesus. There's no way you're the Messiah. Right? You can't even beat me in arm wrestling. There is no way that you are God in flesh. I get it. So James wasn't on board. But then he saw his brother murdered. He saw his brother's body put in a tomb. Then a few days later, he saw his brother walking and alive again. So here's what he wrote in response to this who gets it right conversation. Acts 15:19. It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. People are searching for Jesus. Why are we getting in the way? People are looking for a Savior, why are we making them jump through hoops and figure out a language that's really weird and doesn't make any sense anyway? Why are we making it difficult for anybody that's different than us to meet the Jesus that we love so much? James says it doesn't make any sense. So let's not do it. Let's not do it. Let's not put anything in the way of the message, because we can't create a culture that keeps people out. We can't create a culture that overshadows and buries the message behind traditions and rituals and all those things. If the message of the church is for everybody, we dare not create a church culture that's an obstacle to anybody. We cannot be an obstacle. We cannot get in the way. It's not about me or you. It's not about how you like the thermostat or how I like this thermostat. We've established I'm winning that one every time. It's not about worship style. It's not about men and women. It's not about race. It's not about money. It's about Jesus. If the message of the church is for everybody, then we cannot create a culture that is an obstacle to anybody. Heath and I laughed this week. We were driving from St. Louis. I know we're way over time, but you guys are good and it's not hot in here yet, so we're okay. We were laughing about how far we've come in the last year. And how different things look. And how crazy it is. And I get it. Because I'm the guy up here with the microphone. And I probably get the bulk of the blame for changes that people don't like. And that's fine. God made me with broad shoulders and thick skin. And I can take it, right? But I love being a part of a leadership team, our elders, our staff, that says, you know what? We'll throw it all out the window. We will change every single thing we need to change if it helps people meet Jesus. Because at the end of the day, when we stand before God as leaders of His church and we answer for decisions we made and things we decided, you know what? I'm going to stand with a clear conscience and I'm going to say, God, I took your message that was for everybody. And I didn't let anything get in the way of me pointing people to you. So we at Jinx Church are going to always be changing, always evaluating, always figuring out, because we want people to meet Jesus and we don't care what it costs. And we don't care what toes we step on, and we don't care if it's too cold. I love you. I will buy you a blanket. Get off the thermostat today. Seriously, people. Leave me alone about that. We're going to do whatever it takes to help people meet Jesus. Here it is. Last one. Ready? Right standing with God is available from God through Christ to everyone who believes. That's it. That's our message. That's what we care about. That's what we pursue. And that's what you as a Christian, you as a Christ follower, our young people that are moving up and figuring this out, this is what we want you to leave us with. Those of you who have been here forever, this is what you tell yourself when it gets uncomfortable. Our message is that there is a right standing with God available from God through Christ to everyone who believes. And we can't get in the way of that. We can't do anything that distracts that. We have to do whatever it takes to help people hear that message. We have to do whatever it takes to help people experience Christ and grow into a belief and introduce them to the one that changes everything. And that's our mixtape series. And that's how we're going to conclude. And in this next season of church and ministry, it's going to be exciting, and we're going to continue to watch God do some amazing things. But whatever you take home, don't let anything get in the way of your message, of our message, of God's message, of Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your love. Thank you for your Son. Thank you for all that you do for us in this life, God. And I pray that you will just build a fire within us that helps us go and pursue a world that's searching, pursue a world that's hurting, and pursue those who need to meet you. And let us do whatever it takes, God, to introduce them to you, to help them find a faith, God, and to help them grow in their belief of you so that you can change them. We pray it all in your Son's name.
Feel your presence.
All right, that's it. You heard the music start. That means it's like the Oscars. When the music plays, you leave the stage. You guys are dismissed. We'll see you next week.